All right, Mike, just get us started with this one. I was going to pull up a map so our viewers can get an idea on the area that you operated in when you first joined 2-5. So,
Okay.
what are we looking at through here, Mike?
Yeah, and very blurry to me. That is a schematic map that shows Annual, and I believe the Quezon Valley is below it.
And
It's in. Go ahead.
well, and with the Anwa Valley, when you first arrived with 2-5, that's where they were operating out of, correct?
That's correct. They had just gotten there, I think, in October of last year. 5.
And how would you describe the terrain of Anwa?
Um, it was a valley, so it was called the Annual Valley. We sat back in that valley. We had mountains to our south, and it was primarily rice paddy with lots and lots of villages dotted in between it. Wide open. I think I wish I had some air. I took a lot of air photos from a helicopter. It would give you a better idea. But just imagine about 75% of it rice paddy.
Wow. I mean, and that's pretty flat and open terrain.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And
Yep.
through
And
that,
lots of tree lines.
and well, with the tree lines too, I mean, you got to constantly worry about, the chance of a sniper anytime you're in the
Yep.
patties, correct?
Yep. And being ambushed. There's quite a few ambushes on Liberty Road on the way from Anwa to Fulak 6. I think the one that comes to mind, which was the worst, was in August of 67 when an entire mine sweep was wiped out, with the exception of one Marine. But there were a number of those type of attacks on the road. We were fighting mostly in Anwa. We fought mostly the Viet Cong. There was one unit when I joined. When I got to Anwa. Sergeant Wilson is the one who told me about it. There was a unit there that had just arrived, and they were a main force Viet Cong unit, and they were called the R-20 Doc Lop Battalion. I always referred to them as the Doc Loppers. So they were a main force Viet Cong unit, 12 to 16, 1800 soldiers. And they told the commanding officer of 2-5 that they would drive us out of the Anwal Valley by the end of 1967.
And the Marines of 2-5 had something else to say about that.
Yeah, they were gone by September. They had to go join the 2nd NVA division in the Quezon Valley because there wasn't much left of them after Tuscaloosa. There were quite a few other battles that took place around in the Arizona territory, Dodge City. Trying to think of the operations. Operation Dixie, I think, was in that area. But they were, and I think they're the ones that conducted the attack on August the 2nd. But they were pretty much gone by the 2nd of, or the September. By the end of September, we didn't seem to be fighting them anymore, but we still had other Viet Cong units to contend with. And the NVA were just beginning to infiltrate into Anwa.
Well, and while we're looking at our map here of the Anwa Basin,
Uh-huh.
the Arizona territory.
Right.
What was the Arizona territory? Describe that for me.
It was rice paddy, dotted with villages, lots of villages, and lots of tree lines again. And it was similar to Anwa. There really wasn't much different from where our combat base was. So plenty of places to spring an ambush, which is what happened on Newcastle. And It was no different. Basically, that entire area was basically rice paddies. When we moved north to it was a totally different place. I mean, it was totally different. We were used to the rice paddies, and there was quite a bit of jungle and Fubai. Rice paddies also, but there was just a lot of vegetation there. So you can imagine if you're fighting in Anwar and you cross the Thuban River and go into the Arizona territory, you have the same thing, except you have more high ground in the Arizona than you do in the Anwar Basin.
Well, and just north of the Arizona territory, you've got this area, Razorback Ridge, right?
Yes,
So,
yes, and
what
that
was
area.
Razorback Ridge?
Pardon?
What was Razorback Ridge?
It was just it was a I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It was high ground. Um, the enemy used it quite a bit, sometime to fire mortars, because that's basically all they had. They didn't have rockets down in that area. And I didn't never had much to do with Razorback. I knew about it. I saw it every morning when I was at Anwar. If I was there, you wake up, you look to the west, and there it is. But it was a area. The entire area, or the entire Arizona, was infested with Viet Cong and NVA, and it was also an infiltration route for the enemy rocket companies that would come through that area to get into the rocket belt and fire rockets at Da Nang.
Well, and I've heard a few Marines mention the rocket belt, but can you describe and explain the rocket belt for us?
It is north of Anwar, a little bit northwest. As I remember it, there was quite a lot of vegetation. We only pulled, I think, one operation there. That area was the operational area for, I believe, the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. So somebody with 3-5 can tell you more about it. We didn't get there very much. Our fighting was mostly done in Arizona, because we had a lot to contend with other than just the Doc Law Battalion. I don't know if you don't know anybody from 3-5. My buddy Jack Schumann, who was with 3-5, sure he would know about the rocket belt.
Well, maybe we can get put in touch with him after this one, and we'll see what we can talk about.
Okay, he doesn't talk very much, but might be able to get him to, if you're interested, might be able to get him to talk. He's a good man. Fought in the Ashall Valley. The entire regiment, I think, went into Ashall Valley after I left. We are actually going into Flak Valley, which led to the Ashall Valley, to try to clean that place out once and for all. We had 3-5, 2-5, and elements, I believe, of 1-5. We're all going to be conducting that operation, and then, of course, TET 68 began, and all the forces were needed in way at that point.
Well, and just speaking of the Arizona, with Viet Cong and NVA operating through this padded area, were booby traps pretty common?
Very common. They actually, Anwar was named Booby Trap Alley. If you read our after action reports, which I have all the after action reports for every day that I was in Anwar, and inevitably there were booby traps. Somebody hit a booby trap every day. I don't really remember many times where we didn't go out on patrol where somebody hit a booby trap. May not have been explosive. We had Marines who stepped in spider holes that had punji spikes in them. I knew one Marine who got hit by a deadfall. But it was primarily explosives, and we would drop bombs on the enemy. If they were duds, the enemy would booby trap them, or they would open them up and get the black powder out of them and make more booby traps. Just depended on what they wanted to do with the, with the bomb. Even with the mortars, they did the same thing.
Where would they typically put the booby traps? On top of the patty dikes, in the patties? Where would you find them?
Everywhere. No specific place. On the patty dikes, walking through vegetation, on trails leading into the villages. As a matter of fact, when I got there, 2-5 was really taking a lot of hitting a lot of booby traps going into the villages surrounding Anwell. And the word had gone out to the villages that if it didn't stop, that the villages would be burned down. And finally got to the point where our CO, I believe it was our battalion commander, who put out the directive that told the people in the village, if we hit a booby trap, we'll burn the villages down. And they stopped after that, because the local VC lived in those villages. Their families lived there. And, they had to have some place to lay low until night so they could go out and ambush and do the things that they did. But they could be anywhere. They can be in the ground. We had bouncing betties and which are pretty sophisticated things. You don't ever want to get caught in a bouncing betty minefield, because they're very, very dangerous mines. They bounce up out. You probably know, but you trip one and it bounces up chest high and explodes out in front of you. And we had Fox Company before Union 2. They were actually got caught in a Bonson Betty minefield, and their casualties were pretty high.
Well, and being in this area with the booby traps, but also knowing that there are Viet Cong sympathizers in the village, I mean, it makes your job difficult trying to work with these people, knowing that at night they're trying to kill you or harm you.
Yeah, when I got to Vietnam, I was pretty darn naive. I didn't had a lot of things I had to learn, and one of them was that the people didn't like us. No doubt about that. We maybe had we had a few friends in a place called Ninh Binh Valley over by Antenna Valley, which we patrolled regularly from Nam Song. And the people in the, I think there was 5 villages, Ninh Binh 1 through 5. And Ninh Binh 5 sat way in the back, and they got a lot of terror attacks back there, and we protected them, and they were friendly to us. But I think most of them would rather we not have been there.
Well, and with that too, I mean, with the villages that did get burned or anything like that, it would even create more animosity towards the Marines in the area.
Yeah. We were very careful not to do that. I mean, it had to be a pretty bad thing for us to, burn down people's homes. Sometimes it was necessary, and we did it a couple times, but that was only because we walked in and asked we asked the village chief if there were weapons in the village, and he said no. And when we searched, we found a big cache of weapons in the what was the name of that village complex? There was about 6, 7, or 8. I don't remember it now. You have it on the maps. One of the maps that I gave you, where the Anwa area, it shows I got them on my map there. That map actually came from my maps. I brought every map I used in Vietnam home, and there's yellow markings on that. Thong Duc, that was the name of it. THUONGDUC, Thong Duc. And so we burned it, and we had a lot of trouble in the villages close to Anwell. We were just not wanted. We were just not liked very well, and the villagers aided in the mines were set in Liberty Road every single day. When the lights went out, the mines went in the road, and there was a point early in '67 where you could see go on Liberty Road, you see a lot of burned out vehicles and a lot of truck drivers wounded and killed there. And so if you were ever going to Flak 6, you had to have the engineers ahead of you sweeping the village. It was a very, very slow, arduous day, and in the hot weather, it was horrible because you're moving slow. You got generally two engineers, one inside each other or beside each other, and they'd pan out, flank a little bit, and they would work their tools, their mine detectors back and forth, and they'd always find something, even if it was just a piece of metal, and they'd have to stop and then dig it out. And that took place for the 6.5-7 miles to Flak 6. And then after that, engineers from across the river from the 7th Marines picked it up. And this happened all the way to Da Nang, because convoys were coming and going from Da Nang all the time. During the summer, during the monsoon, they couldn't come. The roads were too muddy. So we relied totally on air supply.
Well, and you mentioned just having the engineers out there, and I mean, that just creates a prime target for any kind of ambushes or Viet Cong, being that they're out front, correct?
Exactly. I went on a lot of mine sweeps as security with Echo Company, with Golf Company a couple times, Fox. I actually was attached at one time or another to all 4 line companies. My company was Echo, and of course my for lack of another word, my loyalty was to Echo Company when they were in the field. But when they came back to An Wall, they would generally go on the perimeter, and then the second company that was back at An Wall would be on alert for Sparrowhawks to go help other Marine units that are in trouble. And it was just a rotation. The other 2 companies were at Nansong and Flak 6. So we had a big base camp. We had basically 600 or 300 infantry at any time there, 2 companies of infantry, 300. But we had an artillery. We had the Echo 211 battery there. We had 8-inch tracks on wheels, or on tracks. I mean, 8-inch guns on tracks. And that was about it as far as protection. A lot of office people, cooks, radio men, truck drivers, and Marines who aren't used to being in combat. I mean, it's no slap to their face. I admired these guys. My own brother was he was in the Marine Corps, and he always got called a pogue because he was an admin. He was an admin, and but I always respected what they did, because if you've ever had your service record lost parts of it, like I did, I had to rely on this guy to put it back together for me, and he did an awesome job of doing it for me. So, but that's just the way it was. They called them pogues, and I never saw it that way, but a lot of the Marines did.
Well, and your truck drivers are necessary for your logistics out there in the field. I mean, ammunition, and in Way City, running casualties back and forth. I mean, essential.
Yeah, exactly. And they ran a lot. I mean, there were trucks. There was some kind of convoy coming in and going every day. Flak 6 had to be supplied. And then when we took Mylock 2, which was about 400 meters to the south of Flak 6, that was a platoon size hill outpost. And then Flak 6, which had been a company outpost, whoever was manning it sent a platoon to man Mylock 2. And Mylock 2 is where I got hit the first time. So,
and to give our viewers an idea here on the area around the Arizona. I've got one of the pictures that you sent me that I'm going to throw up
Uh-huh.
so people can see it, but it's this flat paddy terrain, and it's just rice paddy after rice paddy and rolling, just flatness. It's just open.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly what it is. And um, ambushes were pretty normal there because the enemy had places to hide. A lot of these villages too in Arizona had trenches built around them. I don't know if they were built during the French and Indochina War. I don't know, but a lot of them had trenches in them, and the enemy could hit you from those trenches. But there were just a lot of tree lines. I mean, and that's generally where we got hit from. I mean, the snipers. I mean, they were in the trees and in the villages, and it was it was it was a fairly active place. So that there was not a lot of major engagements in the Anwar Valley. Not to say that, and I'm talking on where Anwar is. I'm not talking about the Arizona. Whenever you crossed into the Arizona, you were inevitably going to get hit during the operation. But that was not our area of responsibility. They called it a tactical area of responsibility. Every Marine battalion had one, and ours was ANWA. And so the only time we crossed Arizona would be to help the 7th Marines, and because that was their area of operation. And we did Operation Arizona. We went over and conducted a joint operation with the, I believe it was 27. It might have been both 27 and 17.
Well, and through that, it prompted a question as you were describing it, with the ambushes being very common. Is that,
Uh,
as a forward observer, could you call in a strike without being fired upon? Could you call it in on a tree line ahead of you just to push
yeah,
off anybody that was in it?
that was called recon by fire. I did it a lot of times because some areas, you have to cross a rice paddy somehow. And you got people your CO's got people on his back, because if you're working with other companies, there's a time schedule to keep. You got to take your objectives, and time is of the essence. And if you have to cross a rice paddy that's 1,000 meters square, a whole click, you want to know when you get in the middle of it, you're not going to be ambushed from all sides. So um, I would call mortars in on places I thought the enemy might be hiding. The CO most of the time would make that decision. He never asked me for my opinion. He had people that did that. He had officers in that, but um, we did it a lot, and it saved lives too. Because a lot of the enemy would DD when they got hit. They would DD. They'd get out of there, and we could see them moving. So yeah, we did that. We did it quite a lot. It was very effective.
Well, after you call in a fire mission like that, would your FDC want a BDA, a bomb damage assessment on the strike or anything like that?
No, no, they um, not very many people asked for that. They didn't. No casualties were ever that I know of. I never sent casualties back to my FDC when we went into an area. If they asked me, I would certainly tell them. But all they were interested in is getting a mission, clearing the mission, and then their responsibility ended when they approved that mission to be fired. And they were sometimes the problem, because um, when you called in the mission to the FDC, they had to look at the map. They had to see what was there, were there villages close by, were there a lot of civilians. They had to know all this stuff. And sometimes you kept getting these questions back and forth while you're being shot at. And um, I mean, more than once, I got a little irritated on the phone because they wouldn't clear the mission, and said, just tell them, you're going to have dead Marines if you don't clear this mission. He said, well, there's villages there. I know, we're being shot from the villages. That's where the that's where the stuff's coming from. That's why I'm calling the mission in. I'm not calling it, you know, because I don't like these people. We're being shot at, and but they would have to go another step farther than that and get okay to fire. Um,
What kind of questions would they ask you in those situations?
they want to know if we saw any civilians in the area. Most of the time, to be honest, most of the time the missions were cleared without problem. But a fire mission going into a village was something they had to look at very, very closely, and they had to make a decision based upon, the information I gave them. I'd always tell them when I call, they sometimes would ask for troop assessment, and I just say, you know, a squad of enemy in the village, or I'd say buku enemy in the village. I can't determine. There's a lot of fire coming, so. But they were very good at clearing the missions. I mean, but there were times that, if you're going to make a decision to drop mortars, artillery, whatever it is, on a village, you better make darn sure that, you're right.
Well, and over the net, would you refer to them as the enemy, or would you refer to them as, Nathaniel Victor? What would be the terms that you would describe over the radio?
I wouldn't use. I wouldn't use. I would always just, if they wanted to know. Like I told you last week when I called in, and I would just call the FDC and say, that's one thing I wanted to clarify here. I don't know if I got it right. Nobody's heard that last video anyways yet. So, but my call sign was Whiskey 1 Alpha. The mortar's call sign would be Whiskey 1, Whiskey 2, 3, and 4. Remember, I told you that.
Yes,
The
sir.
Alpha in my designation, I don't know if I told you. I think I did, but it designates me as a forward observer. So that's what that is. So when I would call, I would just say Whiskey 1, this is 1 Alpha. And then I'd wait for them to come back, and they would come back and they'd say, go 1 Alpha. And I said, I have a fire mission. Can you copy? And they say, Roger, send it. And I'd tell them 762-326, OT 4200, request 1 round Whiskey, Papa will adjust. Rarely. I mean, probably could count them on one hand the times they asked. But next thing I would hear is shot, meaning my spotter round or my adjusting round, white phosphorus is on the way. And then I would look at it. If it's not on target, it's add 100, fire for effect, 25 rounds Hotel Echo, meaning HE. Or if I don't want to fire that, maybe I don't think we need the heavy duty stuff. Just say Hotel Echo Lima, and they would know what rounds to get ready.
Well, and speaking of the importance of the communication aspect here, did the terrain ever impact radio communications?
Not with me. I never had a radio communication breakdown ever. I imagine people operating up in mountains and jungle. I imagine they had problems. Anwell was not a jungle. I mean, we sometimes pulled patrols in the foothills behind Anwell because some of the recon guys said that they saw troops moving in that area, and we'd go into the area. But even in there, I didn't have any problem.
Well, and continue this, speaking of the communications, how many batteries would you carry for the Prick 25 out in the field?
I wish Ron was here. He had one in the radio, and I think he carried 2 spares. Because he had on his radio on both sides. I think there were 2 pouches there to carry 2 batteries.
And would you wrap the radio in any kind of plastic, or the batteries in plastic, to keep them from getting wet? What would be the process?
Sometimes they would take plastic and wrap the radio, but the radios were pretty sturdy when it came to water. I mean, I saw radio operators fall into a river and get up and their radio still work. In the monsoon, especially, some guys would wrap the radio and didn't seem to affect them. Some of them even wrapped their phone because people or the FDCs would tell them, you're garbled, and that could happen if water got into them, I guess.
Well, and with all of this, thinking about just the terrain of, and wow, what was the temperature like in this flat rice paddy area?
Well, during just one during the northern monsoon, it would be very, very rainy. The temperatures would be humid even with the rain. Cool off at night, kind of be a little chilly. Same with the southern monsoon. But the southern monsoon, you had temperatures. Operation Arizona, temperatures were in excess of 120 degrees. They actually had to. Operation Arizona was ended because of the temperatures, because of the heat casualties we were taking. Both 2-7, 2-5. I was with Hotel 2-5 at that time with Sergeant Lackey. I was still at that point training, and then Echo Company. Gordon Wilson was with Echo Company. They had a number of casualties as well. So our battalion commander had operational control, and he called the operation off after 4 days because of the casualties. And the heat was pretty standard, not always 120, but always near 100 during the hottest part of the season. I would say from May to October, then the northern monsoon would kick in.
Well, and being that you mentioned just the heat in general, how many canteens would you guys of 2-5 carry out there in the field?
We had two. I carried one on each hip.
And would you use the regular water, or would you add any flavoring to it? I know some of the guys like to add different flavor packs.
We would use the water, drop in the halazone tablets. We'd all fill our canteens from the water buffaloes before we left. And while that water was supposedly purified, how, I don't know, but I never saw anybody purifying them. But I had my mom send me a Tang. I like to put Tang in mine. Other guys got, they had Kool-Aid. Some guys just drank it the way it was. I had one canteen with the Tang in it, and the other one just plain water, because there was a lot of salt in that Tang, and it dehydrate you.
Right.
So, but as far as the other guys, a lot of them had Kool-Aid, and some just had water. I always found something to drink, and in the field, you always came across. At Anwal, you always come across streams, and you could fill your canteens and drop in a halazone tablet and kind of purify it.
Well, and speaking of streams and the environment and just consistently going through that, were leeches or anything like that a problem down south?
Sometimes your legs were exposed, and you walk through water. We walked through some water in the foothills behind us that was chest high, and it was a platoon-sized patrol. And when the guys got out of it, a lot of them had leeches on them because a lot of them had their sleeves up. Whenever we went into vegetation like that is thick as that, my sleeves were always down. My boots were always bloused because I didn't want to get those things on me. And the guys would get them, and some of them would just take a cigarette and burn them off, and however they had to get them off.
I can't imagine with any of that. But through all of that, I do want to pull something up for us here that I think is relevant. Just speaking
Okay.
on you being in country, give our viewers a visual of a
Oh,
Mike Harris.
my first day there. First day in Vietnam. I got my M14 rifle. You can see I'm still wearing stateside utilities. Yeah, I don't have jungle fatigues yet because they didn't have them yet. They didn't have my size, so I got them in about a week or so. And those rotted really fast. I mean, the rain rotted those things, and in a week you would need another pair. They were that bad. I guess the jungle fatigues were made out of different material, and they lasted a long time. But yeah, that was me with my M14 on the 20. That would have been the 29th of January, 1967.
Well, and speaking of the rain, did the rain and the wet climate and the rice paddies, did they affect the M14 and the wooden stock any at all whatsoever?
Of course, I was an FO. I didn't shoot my weapon very often. I didn't even want to carry a weapon when I was a forward observer, other than a 45 on my, up here on my chest. But the lifers made me, for some reason, pick an M16 in case we got ambushed real bad. And I always told them, if we got ambushed that bad, is like you're talking about, there'll be plenty of M16s laying around, and I'll be able to get my hands on them. But the M14 was a workhorse. You, I know guys have said this. People have poo-pooed it. You can drop your M14 in the water and pick it up in the mud and pick it up, and it'll shoot. And I believe it would. I mean, it was a durable weapon. It just wasn't for that war.
Well, and I was going to ask you your opinion of a Marine who saw the M14, utilized it, and the M16. Do you think the M14 should have been kept in the Marine Corps arsenal instead of the M16?
No, simply because you couldn't carry enough ammo. I when I got there, I had 4 ammo pouches, so that meant I could carry 80 rounds on my hip and one in my and in the rifles. You got 100 rounds. Now with those same 2 things, you could with the M16 you could put 2 in each pouch in the M14 pouch. You can take you can put one in the another in the M16, and a lot of guys would tape a second um, uh, magazine onto that, so they'd have 6 times 30 is 180 rounds. But we had more than just the 2. Each of us. I had 4 pouches, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8. One in my rifle. That's 9 times 20. That's 180 rounds. So, and everybody always carried a lot of ammo in their packs in case we got hit. But I didn't like the M16 at first because 2.5 had a really, really bad time with it, and so bad that members of Echo Company, with the blessing of our commanding officer, Captain Blessing, he went to the battalion commander, said, if you're going to send me out in the field with that M16, he said, you're going to have to let me have at least 1 platoon with with M14s. And he let them go back and get the M14s, 1 platoon, because those things jammed horribly, and Marines were killed pretty readily too. I had one I shot one time, mine in Nonsong. We were patrolling around Recon Mountain, and enemy showed up above us, and they were spotted, and the word went around, on the count of 3, everybody shoot. Well, I said, well, I ain't gonna call anything in on them, so I shot the M16, and it jammed the very first time, and I didn't have my jamming rod on, to get rid of the blocked around the jam. So my rifle stayed like that till I got back to Nonsong. A lot of other guys' weapons jammed, so much so there was a guy who wrote home. We don't know who it was, but he wrote home to his mother. He said, I can't write directly to my congressman. I'll get in serious trouble, but this is what's happening, Mom and Dad. And there were quite a few who did that. And in April, a congressman and his entourage came and interviewed people, found out what was really happening, because unfortunately the commandant of the Marine Corps was, let's just say he was political. And he actually blamed the Marines. He said no weapon that isn't cleaned regularly and sufficiently enough, it's not going to be very friendly to them. And we clean those weapons. Those weapons were clean. Just the environment would tell you you've got to clean those weapons. But the commandant, General Cushman, never cared for General Cushman because of that, because he blamed the average Marine for not cleaning his rifle. And we weren't the only one. There were throughout all of Vietnam, especially up near Khe Sanh. Now I know the commanding officers up there who were on Hill 881 and 861. They sang the praises of the M16. It worked for them there. That was fine. But down at An Hoa in the Khe Sanh Valley, during Operation Swift, Hotel Company had an entire platoon. They walked by a village, the company did. And then they had another platoon go back. And I don't know why I think they were going back to get ammo or something for the rest of the company. And they got ambushed going back. The enemy wasn't there when they passed by, or they were there and they guessed that we were going to come back. I don't know. But they went back and they got ambushed really bad. And an entire squad was found in a rice paddy where their rifles broke down trying to clear jams and shot in the head. They all had powder burns on their head. Mm. So I know this for a fact because I talked to the guys on hotel. I wasn't there, but the guys who were there from Hotel Company, they told me. And it wasn't pretty. The weapon just wasn't working for us. And I don't think it did start working for us until it worked pretty good for us at Operation Ballistic Charger in September of '67. We had a lot less jams. By that time they had changed out, I think, the buffer, and something to do with the grease that was used. I don't know what that had to do with it. But it was pretty bad, when you put weapons in the hands of your soldiers and they jam, and Marines died for it. I know Army guys as well died that got some of these Armalite M16s. I think that the Army used the Colt version of the M16, and that was excellent. The Marine Corps should have done that, but you know why they didn't? It was cheaper. The Armalite offered them at a cheaper rate, and so, I mean, we pulled our weapons right out of the box. There was a box and opened it up, and they were greased. And we took them to the range there at An Hoa. We had a range, and we fan fired them, and they jammed when we fan fired them. So, it was bad all the way around. But to their credit, they did solve the problem. I know after '67, and I know in Way City they were exceptional. And they also allowed more firepower. You could carry more ammo and all the way around in your magazines, in your pack, and so it was pretty good weapon after that.
Well, and once you finally get to that point, of course, Way City is towards the end of your tour. But how long did you have the M14 with 2.5? When did you transition to the M16?
I got there on January the 29th. That's when I arrived at An Hoa. And we got the M16 in April.
And was there any short respite in the patrols, or did you immediately get the M16 and were sent on combat operations with it?
Oh, no. Yeah, our battalion commander, Colonel Jackson, Lieutenant Colonel Jackson, he said, we got the fan fire. That was it. That was our introduction to the M16. And then everybody turned, and when they went in, they turned their M14 in, they got their M16. And that was, I mean, that's the way it was handled at Danwang.
Well, and with that, speaking of the M14, there's another picture you sent me that I wanted to bring up of this, hard charging, gung ho Marine here that we're gonna look at. So I'm gonna bring it up just because it's a
Okay.
great photograph. I think that kind of resembles a lot of young Marines in their prime.
I don't know about my prime. I'd only been there. All those, everything you see me in my utilities, my stateside utilities, that was in about the first 10 days. So I'm what they call the new guy there. I won't tell you what they really call us, but um, FNGs.
Well, I know what
But
the F stands for.
but yeah, I was gung ho. Those pictures were totally taken to appease my mom because they were taken with an Instamatic camera. So I got instant photographs, and I sent all those photographs. I sent home to my mom, and um, I didn't send any other pictures. I don't remember ever sending pictures after these. Most of the ones I took, I was grungy and had a beard, and um, I don't know. It's my mom, when I came home, and they picked me up at Old Thor Marine Corps Air Station, and she just looked at me and started crying. And she knew right away. Her fiance landed at Normandy, and she told me this story that night when we were at home, and everybody else was in bed except her and I. And she said, "What I told you coming home in the car," she said, "is you're reminding me of Kenny, my fiance. He's not my dad, but he was her fiance, and he landed at Normandy. And when he came home, he was in and out of VA facilities, and he just disappeared off the planet. She never heard from him again, and she said you had his eyes." Um, I don't know what that meant. I mean, I look at that picture you put up, and I look at the picture when I was at Da Nang getting ready to come home, and I do see a difference. Um, I know I felt differently than that first picture.
Well, and to add to that as well, it's like we've got this picture here, of still a young Mike in country, flak jacket donned, and I mean
Yeah.
it's
And we're at Anwa. We never wore our flak jackets at Anwa. That's a picture photo.
now
John Wayne.
why
That
didn't
was
you
John
guys wear the
Wayne.
flak jackets?
Pardon?
Why didn't you guys wear the flak jackets?
Why didn't we?
Yes, sir.
We rarely got mortared. It was I can only think of 3 times we got mortared because when I got there, the Marine Corps was uh, in the process of putting sensors everywhere within range of a mortar in every direction. And if those mortars opened up and a sensor went off, the artillery was on it in a second. I mean, they lit that thing up. So, um, I mean, we got mortared on Christmas, but those mortars overshot us. They just wanted to. I think that the North Vietnamese just wanted to let us know they were still there. But they could have hit it if they wanted to. I mean, and Wall, I'm sure they had maps and they knew where it was, but they just overshot a half a dozen 82 mortars. But we really didn't need to wear them at Anwal, and we didn't wear them.
Well, and what was the flak jacket designed to do?
Make you feel good. That's it. It wouldn't stop a mosquito from biting you, let alone a bullet. No, it was all in the head. I mean, shrapnel, you, I'm sure there were guys who didn't get wounded because of the shrapnel, but if you got a big piece of 81 millimeter mortar or 82 millimeter mortar through that flak jacket, you would suffer a pretty serious, if not fatal wound. But they demanded that we wore them, and everybody knew the same thing I just told you. It was done to make us feel good, feel safe. It's not like today when these guys have Kevlar and they have this really good stuff. A bullet hits it. I don't care the caliber, it's going through it. All it was in it was plastic fiberglass stuff, and it was weird, to tell you the truth.
Well, and based on how you describe it, if you get hit, would you not have the pieces of the fiberglass also in the wound?
Most likely, most likely.
And that also could further complicate things if you're hit and wounded.
Yeah,
Well, and
yeah, and I'm
go
sure
ahead.
it happened to guys.
Well, and how much did it weigh? How much extra weight was the flak jacket?
It was fairly light. It's not. It looks big and cumbersome. It wasn't. It was material that had plastic. What you call it? I don't know what to call them because that's what they were. They were just plastic, and they were fibrous though. They weren't just like hard. Like you look at a piece of plastic, they were fibrous. They had stuff around them, and they sat inside the jacket. So um, you'd see them once in a while when your jacket was, if you saw somebody's jacket laid down and they maybe had gotten hit, and you see it tore open from the inside. But no, um, if they had given me the option to wear it or not wear it, I'd have probably wore it just just for the feel good part of it. I don't know, but there were guys who hated it. They were um, they were convinced it wouldn't stop anything, and it most of the time it didn't. Somebody got lucky, I'm sure, but um, it didn't help.
Well, and the feel good part in the field, sometimes you need that little morale boost, just
Yeah,
stuff
yep,
to get you through.
yeah. I wore it religiously when the first time I went out in the field, first few times, um, and after I talking to the Marines who had been around, we had guys in the companies, including the 81 Mortar Platoon, who had been up at Contien. That's where they came from. 2-5 came down from Contien and DMZ, and they were formally they were I forgot what they were formally members of the 9th Marines, and they sent the 5th Marines from the states they were under strength, and so they joined these other Marines with them, and then I think the 9th Marines came along later. I don't remember how that worked, but they had been up in Contien, and they told the stories about the flak jackets. It just didn't work.
Well, and shift that too. Speaking of, guys that made an impact on you, we've got
Uh-huh.
this Marine right here that you told me about that should be on our screen now. I think he's there.
Yeah, he is.
All right, and this is Gordon Wilson.
Yes, it is Sergeant Gordon Wilson, and probably the best forward observer I ever had the opportunity to meet and train with. And he taught me a lot about being a forward observer. The little things like, don't disappoint the grunts. Don't make them lose faith in you or lose trust in you, because you'll be gone. It wouldn't take but a few grunts in the company to get rid of an FO if he wasn't good and couldn't do the job. When you got hit, Gordon told me, when you get hit, the skipper wants quick missions on target, few adjustments, and I never forgot that. And I just watched him. I watched him for during Operation Newcastle. Um, Watched him in Operation Union. Union was his last. No, I'm sorry. Union 2 was his last. I was with him on Union 1, which for us didn't take place in the Quaison Valley. It took place in Antenna Valley. And because there was this feeling that there were tunnels under the Quaison Mountains, that's how the same enemy who you fought in Quaison one day, 12 hours later, could be over in the Antenna Valley without being spotted from the air. Because my memory serves me right, the NVA second division was supposed to be somewhere between 18 and 20,000 men. So, but you know, that's where we went to Antenna Valley, and we had firefights, but nothing really bad, not like they were getting in Quezon. And I actually called my first fire mission in during Operation Union.
Well,
I actually, after all that time, got to call in my first fire mission. Then I went with Gordon on Union 2. And then when he came back, they took him out of the field. He had been in the field for 8 months and he wanted out. I mean, he had seen a lot from Contian to Quezon to Antenna Valley and Arizona. He had been to all of them, Dodge City, Christmasville. And so he recommended me to Captain Pat Blessing, and I had to go introduce myself to Captain Blessing. And he's the guy, when I walked in, who said, "Son," he said, "how old are you?" I said, "I'm 18, sir." And he said, "You're going to be my forward observer?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "How, you sure you're 18 and not 15? And, I felt about that. I said, "No, sir, I'm 18 and I can do the job." He goes, "I know you can, because Gordon Wilson told me you can. The day that you can't do the job, you won't be my forward observer." And he told me to just remember one thing. He said, 81 mortars is my artillery. He said, you can put more fire on a target in less time than the artillery can. You can put 20, 25 rounds on target for every 2 or 3 rounds that the artillery puts on target. And he meant that. He was serious about it. And it was that way when Ron Christmas went into Way. He wanted to have a forward observer because he knew that would probably be the only crew serve weapon, maybe along with a 106 that we'd be allowed to use. So Gordon taught me a lot. He's a good man, and was a great Marine. And I've seen him. I saw him once when back in the 90s. I saw him, and he was in a pretty bad way with PTSD. He had just come back from visiting Vietnam and tried to get me to go back with him. I said, "No, I told you when I left Vietnam, I left for good. I don't want to go back." And so that was the last time I seen him, though I talked to him. He lives in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And he wasn't his. No, I won't say that. Never mind. Let's move on.
yes, sir. Well, you spent 4 months training under Sergeant Wilson, learning the trade of an FO. I mean, that's impressive.
Not only him, it wasn't only him. I also trained with Sergeant Lackey. I was on Arizona with Sergeant Lackey. Sergeant Wheeler did all my classroom training because he said that stuff you learned back at Camp Pendleton and mortar school, that wasn't forward observer procedure. Out here, you can throw all that out the window, he said. And then so we started in the classroom. We moved into the field, just doing little patrols around Anwar. I would go out, and Sergeant Wheeler he was a forward observer. He had come in he was there quite a while too. And I would go with the forward observer with whatever company they wanted me to go out with them with. And he said, "You just observe and you listen. Don't interfere. Just observe and listen. Ask your questions when the firefight's over and you get back. Save them for when you get back to Anwar or wherever you're going back to." And that's what I did. I just listened. And like I said, my first fire mission would have been in Operation Union on, I think it was May 5th.
Now, with the training that you got, though, I mean, that has to be invaluable. You're getting hands-on experience with excellent combat veterans. I mean, nothing.
Yeah, it invaluable. You could have never got that in the classroom ever at Camp Pendleton, unless you got these guys when they came back. When I went home in '68, I didn't go. I went to the 28th Marines for I think it was with the 23, just a couple of months, and then they TAD'd me down to the Combat Infantry Training Regiment to teach forward observer procedure and map and compass reading. So I was down there. I was TAD'd down there about a year, and then I went back to 228, and I got out of the Marine Corps about 6 or 7 months later.
Well, and in your time with 2-5, I mean, even just before Union 2, you met some legendary Marines, or that would become legendary Marines.
Yeah, that um, Captain Graham. Captain Graham was the commanding officer of Fox Company 25, Medal of Honor recipient posthumously um, um, for Operation Union 2. And he led a charge against 2 machine guns and took one of them out, but couldn't get the second one. And he was the last thing that he was heard on the radio saying is that he was staying with the lieutenant who was wounded. I don't remember which lieutenant it was, but he was staying with him and his radio operator, both who were badly wounded, and he was being attacked by 20-30 NVA, and he died there. And the other one was PFC Melvin Newland, good friend of mine. He was a machine gun on the machine gun team. I don't think he was actually the gunner as a PFC, but he was the gunner on Nonsong the night it was overrun, and his actions were heroic. Anybody can Google both these men and read their Medal of Honor citations. What they did was, they're legends actually in the Marine Corps. I went to Pendleton many years ago, and they had the Melvin E. Newland Mess Hall, and they had the Captain James A. Graham Avenue on Camp Pendleton. So it's these guys are a legend. I was proud to be able to serve with them.
Well, and in many ways, for me at least, you're a legend in your own right, if I may say so, with the story that you have, a very unique story of your time. And so, but it's not to shift gears. It's one of the things I love about the Marine Corps is they keep their history. These famous Marines living and dead, their deeds, the units. And that's what I love about Marines. You're taught that from basic training and throughout your career.
Yes, we are. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, history classes at boot camp are long. I mean, you get a lot of them when you leave there. Even when you do the Crucible, there's history involved. You got a course that's named after John Basilone. You got a course that's named after Chesty Puller. I believe now you have a course there. If I remember, my granddaughters both graduated from MCRD Paris Island. They're both Marines. They're both out now. They're married to Marines. So, but I believe they named something down there after Captain Christmas. One of the things during the Crucible. But all these guys, I didn't know Captain Christmas long. I mean, he came in January of '68. I'd been there already a year, and I was going to be on my way home in about 50 days. But I admire these guys. I mean, I don't mind talking about them because they're my heroes, because I knew them and I know what they did, and I know the environment in which they did it, and it takes quite a person to charge 2 enemy machine guns. And they weren't light machine guns either. They were heavy machine guns. So, well, that's all I'll say about that, is just that I admire these guys. And I know Captain Graham's son and daughter went back there. I have a video. A friend of mine went back with them. They had about 10 people go back, and they took his son and daughter, who were very young at the time he was killed, and they took them back to the village of Vin High, where it happened, right in the front of the village of Vin High, in a 1,000-meter rice paddy, and it was surrounded by hedgerows. And that's where the enemy was when I walked into the rice paddy. But to charge 2 machine guns, I don't know if I could have done that. I think you do it at the spur of the moment.
Well,
But
in many ways,
there's
Captain Graham has been described as Marine's Marine. I mean, the
yeah,
epitome of that.
he was a Christian too, and I admired him for that. He always shaved in the field. It didn't matter how many days he was in the field, he shaved with cold water, dry shave. And no, I said, I ain't doing that. I ain't scratching my face up. I cut myself as it was shaving. I couldn't imagine shaving, dry shaving. But he looked spick and span. Even on the day, even they say even on the day that he died, he did. But
Well, and we'll eventually get to that day because I know Echo Company, of course, has a story in its own right, and as well as all the companies do for 2.5. But what was your first operation that you went out on?
well, before I went on my operation, I should say this because I didn't start out as an FO right away. They didn't put me as I told the story last week how I told them I wanted to be an FO, and they said I could begin my training. Well, I didn't know the training was going to last as long as it did. So they said, Sergeant Wheeler said, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go on the field tomorrow to Mylock 2. You're going to be there with 2 of the mortars. I told you 4 mortars or 2 mortars in each section, 8 guns in the 4 sections. And you're going to go out with them tomorrow. And we want you as a forward observer to know what happens on the other end when you call in a mission. We want you to see what the FDC does. We want you to hear how they call the mission in. We want you to hear all that stuff and see all that stuff and get it ingrained into your head. So I went there and we were on that little hill and the rest of the company was on that big hill, Flak 6. And we get sniped at every day there. There was one sniper there. He was very poor shot. He hit a Marine in the foot, and that was about the extent of it. I got there I think on around the 9th of February, and then we got out of there at the end of the month. But on the 27th of February, the night of the 27th, I had to stand gun watch. That means I had to sit by the phone and listen for any forward observer who called in for a fire mission. And just listen. I didn't run the phone or anything. I didn't operate it. I just listened to what went on, and enemy soldiers creeped up to our lines, and they fired 3 rifle propelled grenades at the mortar pit. I didn't know they fired it at the mortar pit at the time. The first one hit in front, and I was there. I was scared out of my wits. And the second one went way over, and that's the one that convinced me to get in the mortar pit. And so I took off running, and I was just diving into the mortar pit, and the other RPG hit right where I had been just about and flipped me head over heels and knocked me unconscious. And when I woke up, I was bleeding from the ears and the nose, and I had a concussion. And so that was my introduction to that was my first introduction to combat. Prior to that, I had been on a convoy security run from Manwa to Flak 6 and Mylock 2 to drop off supplies. And we got some enemy opened up with us. Wasn't much to think of, wasn't much to tell. Nobody got wounded on our side, and we didn't have a forward observer with us, so we just had the grunts just return to fire. But so that was my first exposure to combat, and I got a Purple Heart. I didn't get it till 1995, but I got it anyways eventually.
Well, 2 quick questions. You mentioned the sniper that was a terrible shot, and I know how Marine Corps humor is. Did any of the guys have jokes about this guy?
I don't remember. I don't remember hearing any. No, I don't really remember. I'm sure if I had it, I would have put it in my diary, but it was just, you know, so and so shot today, and they had a name for him, and I don't even remember the name, and I checked in my diary, and it wasn't I didn't put anything in there other than um, our weekly or our daily sniper fired and hit so and so in the foot, and most of it is just miss, 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 miss. He only fired one round, and then he went under because as soon as he fired a round, Gordon Wilson was on the. Gordon was there too. He was the FO when I went out in the field, and Gordon was on him with mortars. I mean, the guy fires one shot, and Gordon fires 20 mortars. You're going to think again about firing again, but he did, and Gordon met the challenge until it finally stopped. Don't know if he killed the guy. He might have just scared him to death, but you don't want to be near a mortar when it goes off. But it was funny. It was relieved the tension there.
Well, and the second question, why did it take 28 years later to get your Purple Heart?
It just it happened in the Marine Corps. It was actually Gordon Wilson and Bill Willingham. Now I didn't send a picture of him, but Bill Willingham was the section leader of that mortar section that went out in the field. He was with Echo Company, Section 1. Remember Section 1, Echo Company, Section 2 of Fox Dolphin Hotel right on up. And so Gordon was already there. And when Gordon came back and he visited me, he asked me, he said, did you ever get the Purple Heart? He said, I'd like to see it because he didn't get one. And I said, you're lucky. Don't be unhappy about it. But he said, no, I didn't. Well, he went and he had been in contact with Bill Willingham. So the two of them got together. They wrote the letter and went to the Commandant of the Marine Corps, who they addressed it to. And he told me he had done it. And I guess a couple of months later, I received a letter and it said, the Commandant wants to advise you that you'll be awarded the Purple Heart for your wound on February 27th, 1967 at Mylock 2. And I was shocked. I mean, he said he was going to do it, but I thought he'd just forget it and that. But, for me, it wasn't that big a deal. I mean, I didn't get killed. And I was kind of odd that way because I got wounded coming out of Way City, and they took shrapnel out of my arm. I think it was bullet fragments because they machine gunned one of the trucks I was in. Killed a lot of the Marines coming out. A lot of them were going home. A lot of them were going on R&R. I was going to get ready to go home because when I left, I only had 8 days before I left Vietnam. I believe out of Way City. So I didn't think I deserved it for that, and so I didn't mention it, and I didn't get medevac. That's probably one reason. Doc forced one of the Marines to sit with me all night, not let me go to sleep. He's probably got a concussion because they didn't want to, if they didn't have to, they didn't want to call a medevac in at nighttime because that thing would be a magnet for a mortar or a machine gun or something. And the enemy always likes to shoot at the helicopters. So that's what I did. I just was watched all night and didn't lay down, just sat up back against the bunker and talking to this guy. And if I get tired, he'd come over and shake me. And then the next morning, they said we're rotating back to Anwar, the whole section, and the new section was coming. And I think Foxtrot was coming to take Mylock 2 and Fulak 6. And so I got back that day. They sent me to the BAS, and doctor looked at my ears and said, you have a ruptured eardrum. I said, yeah. I said, how do your ears sound? And I said, they're ringing really bad and I have a headache. And he said, just take it easy for about a week, 10 days, you'll be fine. And so that's what they made me do.
Well, and For that week to 10-day period, would you go out on patrols or just light duty around and walk?
No, they would let me, Doc wouldn't let me do anything. And there was patrols I could have gone out on with any of the forward observers, actually, because Gordon was the main guy. He's the guy. I mean, he was training me basically to take over for him at Echo Company. He told me that. So, but they could have sent me with any of the other ones, but Doc said no. He said you need to get over the concussion, and I said, what about the ringing in my ears? And he said that probably will never go away. And it hasn't. I've had tinnitus since the day I got home. Everything my mom said was, huh? So I'm wearing hearing aids now, but didn't get them till, I guess, 20 years ago.
Well, and after that 10-day period was up, what happened next? You've coming out of this concussion. What's the next step for Mike Harris?
Well, the next step is Operation Newcastle in the Arizona territory. And I got word that Echo Company was going to be one of the companies. I don't think Echo committed anymore. I think the 7th Marines, we were operating again with the 7th Marines. I know we were with the 7th Marines. I don't remember whether it was 1727 or 37. And so I went with Gordon to meet Captain Blessing, and Captain Blessing explained to him that he was training me. He didn't say he was training me to take over the FO from Echo Company, but he was, and he said he'll be going with me on the operation, and so he can see what I do, and listen to communications, and so he said, just listen, watch, and if I get hit, do what I do. Do what I just did, and get hit or use the phone. But we went out and we crossed the river, the Thuban River. I can't remember the exact date. It began, I think, the 17th of March, and it ended the 25th of March. And it was mostly patrolling. That the enemy, for some reason, didn't want to tangle with. I believe there was three companies on the operation. That's almost 500 Marines, and you got FOs with all of them. You probably have artillery FOs too. I don't know if we had them that day, but so we crossed the Thuban River on Amtrak's, and for most of the day we patrolled, and nothing really happened that day. Sniper fire, and then I think on day 3, one companies from 7th Marines got hit really bad, and we weren't. They called in airstrikes, and they had F-8 Crusaders were coming by. The F-8s could carry an unbelievable rack of bombs, and so the F-8s were there, some A4 Skyhawks, and then eventually some F4 Phantoms, and they dropped bombs for a long time, and we were then told to move into the vicinity of that unit, and I don't remember what unit it was, but so we moved to where they told us to go, and on the way there, we got ambushed, and Skipper told Lieutenant Fuller, Second Lieutenant Fuller. He hadn't been there long. He was fresh from the States, probably about a month and a half, and he was commanding. I believe he was commanding 1st Platoon at the time, and he was there when we were at Mylock 2. He was the CO. I think I sent pictures to you too. He was the CO there, and I think I sent a picture of him. He went to Virginia, or to military, I think VMI, as a matter of fact. And Um, his platoon was ordered to try to flank the enemy, um, which is generally standard procedure when you're ambushed like that, to try to get around to their flank and even get at their rear if you can. And on the way there, his platoon came under automatic weapon fire. They ran right into it. The enemy, and I remember eventually everybody talking about it, and the enemy anticipated that's what we were going to do. I'm sure they were beginning to learn some of our tactics, um, and he got hit, and he went down, and um, he was calling in air artillery on the phone and calling it in on the enemy, and he couldn't move. His platoon was pinned down, and any of them that would have gotten up and tried to get out would not have. There were a number already dead and wounded, and more were becoming casualties as they continued to sit there. So he got on his radio, and he started calling in artillery, and then he just laid his head down, and this was told by the Marines who were there. He just laid his head down, and he was still on the phone calling in the artillery, and he died right where he was. And about that time, the enemy broke contact, and nothing but medevacs for the next hour and a half. And he was eventually awarded the Navy Cross for his actions that day. And that's another guy I admire, and he was best friends with Gordon Wilson. They both lived in Stone Mountain, Georgia, went to school. So it was exceedingly hard on Gordon. You can't imagine the pain in Gordon Wilson. And when I saw him, when he came to visit me in the 90s, that pain was still there, and it was worse. Um, you look at the picture, and he looks as young as myself, and I was only 18 at the time, and I think he was 22 or 23. But he was a good skipper. I mean, he was a good platoon commander, and
Well, this
and
is
now he was dead, and so we just continued and he got hit, I think, in the 25th, and the company, or the operation ended a day or two later. The enemy broke contact, which is kind of their habit: hit you hard and then head for the hills, head for Charlie Ridge or wherever else they came from the Razorback.
well, and speaking of Lieutenant Fuller being hit, how would you take care of the casualties? I mean, would you try to drag them back, call in a bird, and get the wounded and the bodies evacuated? What would you do?
Well, you got to secure the area first. You have to. If the enemy is still in contact with you, you have to fight him, and that's what Echo Company did. And I was with Gordon and moving with Gordon. He always moved with headquarters. He always moved with the skipper, because he's got to be able to get in touch with him without switching the tack on his radio and calling. So, and that was the same with me. I moved a lot more than Gordon did with individual platoons during operations, because that's the way the skipper wanted, and sometimes the lieutenant wanted it, platoon commander. And in this case, Echo Company had to come and battle them, and we couldn't. The casualties were not going to be able to be recovered and evacuated for the dead and the wounded until we sent the enemy running. They're defeated and right there in the battlefield, and that's what we did. And and they just do what they always did. They just disappeared into the jungle of the mountains, and they just break contact. And so it took about an hour, maybe an hour and a half to get rid of them, but get them on the chopper and get them to Da Nang, to Graves registration into First Med Battalion for the wounded.
Now, is Lieutenant Fuller in this picture?
Yes, he was. Yeah, he has yes, that's him, bottom left. That's Lieutenant Fuller. And that guy in the middle is his gunnery sergeant. I'm sorry, but let me look with my glasses, see if I could see. I should know that. No, it's the one on the right that's his gunnery sergeant. Um, and he was a company. I'm sorry, he's his platoon sergeant, and he didn't get hit that day.
Now,
But his radio operator did. His radio operator is in there. He is the guy on the. He's the guy, the Mexican guy, the guy on the left. He was his radio operator. He got hit and killed too because he was with him.
now, did was this your first time under rifle fire from the NVA?
Other than the sniper, that sniper at Milac 2, yeah, this was in that little nothing on the riding convoy security. That was the worst up to date. We estimated we probably ran into an NVA company. We don't know what an NVA company consists of. Marine company's 150. I know it's smaller than a Marine company, but if you're ambushing a platoon of 50, it wouldn't take long with a machine gun to incapacitate that platoon, and that's pretty much what they did. I mean, the guys were fighting back that could, and it wasn't that all of them died. There wasn't just I think it was Lieutenant Fuller, his radio operator, and two or three others, and some wounded, and so they continued to fight back, and then the enemy just broke contact.
Well, and from your perspective, what did that fight sound like?
Oh, it was frightening. I never heard that many weapons going off at the same time. Even at Pendleton when we were in basic infantry training, and it was. I mean, I understand why my ears were horrible when I got home. I'd never heard anything like it. The rifle range didn't match it, and firing. Well, there is something but we only fired one, or there were only two of them on the range that we all got to fire. That was the BAR. It was very loud. And the M60 machine gun, but we weren't firing 150 of those. Only one. Here you had everything. Everything on the field that could fire was firing. And Captain Blessing had his problems going on because while Lieutenant Fuller was pinned down and they couldn't get to him, we were under attack as well.
Now, did you fire your weapon in this engagement?
I did not. No, I did not. I did what Gordon Wilson told me to do, and I listened to his radio conversation with the Fire Direction Center. And unfortunately, we were at that point out of the range of 81 mortars. So we had an artillery forward observer with us who did the job anyways. But we were outside 3,200 meters. I believe that's the effective range of the mortar firing HE. And so the artillery forward observer is the one who called in the fire. And I told you, very seldom are you out of range. You're usually in range of somebody, but not always. There was blind spots throughout Vietnam. Marines did the best they could, and they did pretty good. I don't remember too many operations where we were outside range of a mortar.
Well, and having seen artillery rounds and an F8 Crusader come through, what is that firepower like to witness and hear?
To witness? Well, compared to what a mortar round sounds like, I would say, to me, when an artillery round whistles over your head, to me, it sounded like a freight train. When a mortar round goes over, it sounds like a bumblebee. I mean, it's just buzzing through the air. You don't nowhere near the artillery round. And but when it makes contact with the ground, I mean, it's anywhere close to it, the ground shakes. And when you have two or three or four guns firing at once, I don't know how many we had firing that day. And we had 105s and 155s. We also had 8-inch guns on tracks. But I don't believe any of the 8-inch guns fired that day, because we were probably, let's say, without looking at my map, I would say we were probably 5 clicks away, 5,000 meters away from Anwal. So we were outside the range, but the explosive power of a artillery round, and the damage it can do. I mean, um, it's amazing, because the enemy it literally caused the enemy to break contact. And I think most of the enemy casualties that day were as a result of shrapnel.
And there was an F8 Crusader, correct?
F8s, A4s, and but they weren't near us. Even if they were, I doubt whether they would have dropped anything, because it was a close-in fight. Um, I don't know. They quite possibly could have fired from the tree line that they were in, and they could have dropped some bombs there, but it was pretty darn close. And I would say no more than 300 meters, maybe
Wow.
250 meters.
And that's
So
danger close for air support, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, I would say so. That's my first airstrike I saw then, and I thought the artillery was bad, but when they were dropping those bombs during their bomb runs for the other company, you could feel the ground shake. So I think in a critical situation, if you were being overrun or something like that, they might do it. If you were in a really bad situation, they could probably come in and drop napalm. Napalm's not going to spread out, 300 meters. But bombs might be another story.
Well, and the reason why I ask is that, just speaking of Lieutenant Fuller and Operation Newcastle, um,
Mhm.
to my knowledge, and I'm going to go out on a ledge here, this is probably the first time that Lieutenant Fuller's name and Newcastle have been mentioned in a recording, more than likely, that's going to be published.
That would be amazing,
And so,
because he was a hero. He was a hero doing. I mean, how do you stay on the phone as long as he did? I mean, he kept the enemy at bay, firing, and um, I just don't know. I don't know how. I mean, he was hit bad. I mean, he got raked by a machine gun. Body was just riddled, and he survived long enough to cause that enemy or to call in fire and cause the enemy to break contact. At least with us, they didn't break contact with. When I say us, I mean our company, his platoon. With us, we were still engaged, and so we had to contend with that before we could get over and help the Marines that were there, and they were already helping each other when we got there. I mean, there's the wounded. We couldn't do anything for the dead, but the wounded guys were helping each other, and so it's I don't know, it's a sight I see often in my dreams, and I don't like to go there very often. I don't do it as much as when I first got home from Vietnam. But occasionally anniversary dates come, of and Newcastle's one of them, of course, Way City, and Union too, and there's a number of them that every anniversary of that on that date, I generally have nightmares, and most of the time I sleep in another room. I'll go because I don't want to wake my wife up. Early on when we got married, I tried to warn her before we got married what it was like. I didn't want to get married when I came home. I didn't even want a fiance, let alone a girlfriend. Um, I just wanted to crawl on a hole and get better. I mean, my mom, as I told you, my mom sensed it right away. But um, um, over the years, I mean, as I guess distance and from that time, they've gotten, I wouldn't say they've gotten any less intense because some of them are really intense still. Sometimes I still yell in my sleep, and um, even one time, I mean, when I first started, when we had our kids were at home, and told you that's the reason I wrote the diary was for the kids because they didn't understand. You know, they were too young, and uh, I literally grabbed my wife at night while we were sleeping by the hair and pulled my gun I had under the pillow and was pointing it at her hair or pointing at her head. And then I just laid back down and put the gun under the pillow and went right back to sleep. And I mean, that you can imagine how she felt. And, so there are a lot of things like that, and it's not something I'm proud of, but um, I got help. I went to a vet center and I got a lot of good help from uh, a former lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. He fought at Anwell. He actually commanded 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. And so he counseled me for 5 years. Took him 5 years before I could graduate and go into the group. But I worked hard, and I still use some of the individual treatments that he gave me, you know, and you ask anybody who knows me, I'm 10 times better, probably 100 times better than I was 30 years ago.
Well,
But you just never forget it. You know, I thought it would. I was so naive when I came home. I thought I'd get better. You know, I'd go back and I'd hang with my buddies. We'd go play basketball, have a beer or two. And, it just didn't happen that way. I was just really naive. I watched too much John Wayne and too many war movies growing up.
well, and I think that's an important aspect of yourself to bring up is the PTSD and the struggle, truthfully, you face because, as a kid, I didn't serve in the military. I can't. I've got a blood disease that unfortunately prevented me from serving. I wanted to, but
Yeah,
I teach about it now. But as a kid, I remember seeing the war movies, and for the movies about the guys, Marines, fighter pilots, Army guys
yeah,
come home, they're heroes. They go back home to their wives and they live
yeah,
normal lives. And that's what society sees. They don't understand, and society doesn't truly see the real impact war has. You don't
yeah.
yourself. You
No,
wanted to be alone. You wanted to be alone and to get better.
yeah,
And that sentiment was felt by, thousands of other Vietnam combat veterans. I mean,
yeah,
it's something that we need to talk about as a society of the
yeah.
impact war does have on you.
It does. It absolutely does. And I don't know who. I think what they said, Santana, that said only the dead have seen the end of the war. Maybe that's it. You know, I mean, that's when the dreams stop and the nightmares and the things like that. But I don't dwell on death. I mean, there was a time when I got home that I wanted to die. Marine Corps couldn't help me. The Navy hospitals couldn't help me. The VA wouldn't touch me. Just as not just me, any veteran. I mean, it wasn't until '83 where they even could come up with a diagnostic code for us. Wasn't PTSD. They had another name for it. It was similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. But in '83 is when they actually came up with the term post-traumatic stress disorder. When they put a name to it, they were woefully unprepared to treat us coming home. They were woefully unprepared for it. And that was on them, and because a lot of Marines took their own lives, and a lot of Army guys, Navy guys, Air Force, a lot of them. I mean, uh, uh, and they were crying for help, but there was no help there.
Oh,
But
yeah, I've
you
got a
ever,
book. Uh, I'll send it to you sometime. Where my plan is to eventually meet up with you because Fort Mill's not that far to go out for lunch sometime and to come visit. But
yeah,
I've got
that'd
a
be
book
great.
that I think you would find interesting called And Then the Guns Fell Silent. And he was with the third Mardiv, 67, 68. But
Uh-huh.
in his introduction, he mentions that after the war, there was an increase in deaths, motor vehicle accidents by military personnel who served in Vietnam. and it was never labeled as suicide, but it was found that the cars were wrapped around trees by
Mhm.
guys who wanted a way out because of the
Yeah,
trauma they were dealing with.
yeah, yeah. And I totally understand that. And one thing that got the attention of the VA was there were a bunch of us who pour over into the VA medical center out by the National Cemetery in LA. I forgot the name of the VA hospital. Um, oh, I don't remember the city. I live there, but I can't remember the city now. But we would go there and pick it every single weekend. Some of us worked. The ones that didn't work, they were there picketing all week. And we go over and we'd be loud and we would demand help. I mean, I tried to get help in the Marine Corps at the Naval with the Navy doctors, and all they wanted to do was give me Valium and diagnose me with extreme anxiety and what was it, extreme anxiety and stress. And then they pop some antidepressants and some Valium in your hand and say take a few of these every day. And I shied away from the drugs, especially the antidepressants. They seem to make me worse, and I tried a lot of them, and so I don't take anything now. Although VA tries to still get me to take them now, but my wife even says you're better off of them than on them. And not that I'm awful anymore, but she knows she knows the anniversary dates as well as I do. And she knows the days when I'm real moody. All she has to do is think, okay, what's the day? And because she read my diary and she knows the dates, she just knows them. Her birthday. I mean, her birthday um, fell on the day that one of my best friends died, Danny Reesberg. He died on July 5th, 67. And of course, she was born on July 5th, 1950. So she remembers it on her birthday. She knows that I'm not myself because I'm thinking of him. And those things just don't go away. And then you come home and you got a ungrateful nation. Um, I mean, I landed at Marine Corps Air Station in El Toro. And that was fine because my home was only 45 minutes away. A lot of these guys had to fly home to the East Coast, Minnesota, and everywhere. And I only had to call my mom and tell her to come pick me up at El Toro. And she knew what it was. She came there that one time to see me off. And um, everybody got their orders. We got off the plane. They gave us our orders to 20 days leave, and once we got them, we could go do what we wanted to do. And I called my mom and said, "I'll meet you on the Greyhound bus bench outside the main gate where you came in at when Lou come in." And I told him, and she didn't know where it was at. I said, Sis knows where it's at. My sister had been there a lot of times, and she knows where it's at, and she can drive you. And so I did, got my bags and got my orders, got my bags and walked out there. And I was about to walk out, and I look, and it far down the right side of the street, as I could see, there's protesters. And of course, they were protesting the war. And so I was getting ready to walk out, and the MP said, "You might not want to go out there." They said, "That's a pretty unruly crowd." I told my mom and I told my mom and my sister and my brothers are coming to, I assume, and I told them I'd meet them on that bench there. I said, I didn't spend 407 days in Vietnam to get freaked out in my own country. So I said, I'll go down there. And they said, okay. And they said, we can't stop you. And so I went and sat, and um, 10 minutes went by, and 15 minutes and 20. And then all of a sudden, this car comes up the road. I thought it was just going to the main gate to go in, but it stopped there. And there were four long hippie looking guys. And they looked at me and said, how you doing, baby killer? And I said, what? And did you call me? And they said, baby killer. And I said, you best move on. I said, I'm waiting here for somebody. And they called me something else, and I called them something. And one guy on the passenger side in the back seat jumped out and came at me. Then they all piled out, and I kicked the one. The guy that got there first got kicked in the family jewels. But that's the only punch I got in for. The other three were on me. But they made the mistake of doing it outside the laundry, the base laundry. Not there's a laundry on the base, but this laundry was a civilian laundry, but it serviced Marines, and that's where most of the Marines took their stuff, and they saw what was happening, I guess, and they come piling out of there and beat the living daylights out of these guys. And I had a little mouse over my left eye, my lip was bleeding, and they helped me up, and they rubbed me off, and they said, "You all right, brother?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine." I said, if I could have taken them on 1-on-1, I would have won, but I couldn't take on four guys. And so the MPs made their way down there to stop all this. That's what as soon as they saw it, they were on their way down, and they were getting ready to arrest him. I said, "Now let them go. They're not worth it. Just cut them loose. I won't file charges anyways. Just let them go." So might want to hang around to give a statement. And I didn't want my mom to see that when she came. And I said, just put them in their car and send them on their way. And that's what they did. And about 15 minutes later, my mom came, and my fiance and my sister and two of my brothers. And we had a reunion right there, right in front of the bus bench. And it was funny because the people across the street, when they saw that, they started clapping. They thought it was something really good. And I couldn't understand that, because guys that were coming to Vietnam from the place were telling us how they were. But that was just those people in that immediate area. They saw this family get together, I guess, and they started clapping. So we got in the car, and my mom looked at me and she says, "What happened to your eye here?" And I said, "Well, I was getting off the stupid plane and I tripped and fell." And my sister looked at me and gave me a stern look, and she knew exactly what happened. And we went up and we made the U-turn around up where the guards were. There's an area you could turn around and come back. And as we went down the road, these people screaming and yelling. My sister was in the back behind me. My girlfriend was sitting, my sister was driving, my girlfriend and me, and my mom behind me. And I'm driving down the road, and I had my hand out the window like this, and I'm giving them the international peace sign all the way down. And it was interesting, to say the worst. But my sister did the same thing too. She knew what happened. It was pretty obvious. But my mom, she just looked at me and she started crying. I mean, and we stayed up that night, and of course she told me about being married or engaged to Kenny, and him landing on Omaha Beach at Normandy and coming home messed up. And of course they didn't get married. My dad married her, and glad he did. I wouldn't be here. So,
Well, you bringing up this talk of, how you were treated, PTSD. A lot of people don't understand that PTSD affected everybody, from
yeah.
guys who just did their jobs to Medal of Honor recipients to
Yeah.
even legacy Marines. And it's like, I'm going to pull up this picture real quick, and I don't know if you know this Marine, but you know of his father. And every Marine knows Chesty Pooler.
Oh yeah.
And well,
that's his son.
That's his son. And his son Lewis Pooler was a Silver Star recipient, served with Gulf 2-1, and came back, wrote a book, struggled with PTSD, but it comes back to it. But he took his life. I mean, son of Chesty Pooler, legendary Marine. Lewis Pooler, legendary himself, but took his own life in the situation. And it happened. It's universal for not just Marines, but like you said, Army guys, sailors, Air Force guys. It was there and ignored for a very long time, and still is to this day. I mean, you Vietnam vets are now finally starting to get the recognition that you deserved, whether or not
Yeah,
people agreed with the war or not. But you're
yeah.
finally starting to get it. That's why I always tell every Vietnam veteran I see, because I mean this. Thanks for your service and welcome home. Because a lot of you guys
Yeah.
didn't get that.
Well, I appreciate that because it was a long time coming, and I didn't go over and fight for the accolades or medals or anything like that. I just wanted to be a Marine, and at the time there might not have been a war going on. I would have still been a Marine because that's what I wanted to be. But I always tell everybody, I said I got the privilege of being able to serve in a war too. They look at me like I'm crazy. But no, um, PTSD is, it's real. People finally came to their senses in 1983, and I think the VA's done a reasonable job of treating PTSD. They're deficient in a lot of other ways, but not in the area of PTSD because um, the counselor I had was exceptional. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better man. I mean, he was a Marine, and he was at Anwa, and he commanded 1-5. So he ate the same dirt I did. He bled in the same places I did, um, and he was able to help me. I mean, I didn't want him to. Some of the things he did, I ran out of the office one time because he shut the blinds. He told me to put a flak jacket and a helmet on, and sit down, and then he put a rifle in my hand. It wasn't loaded. It wasn't even real. I don't think. I think it was one of these stage things. And he put it in my hand. Then he says, "Now," he said, "I just want you to close your eyes." And close my eyes. He reached over and put the tape recorder on, and he started playing real sounds of combat in Vietnam. And I know I screamed an expletive at him, threw the rifle, a flak jacket, and the helmet on the ground, and I ran out of there. And I got my car and went home, and I told my wife, I'm not going back there. That's not helping me. It's not helping me at all. It's hurting me, and so I'm not going back. And she convinced me to, but Joe called the next day and he said, "We're not finished." And he'd old rugged Marine. I mean, an old lieutenant colonel. He was a Mustanger. Came up to the rank, and he was a no BS type of a guy. I would have enjoyed serving under him, but he said, "Oh no, you're coming back." And he set the appointment up again, and we went the next day. And he said, "Are you ready for this?" He is holding the flak jacket and the helmet, and had the rifle. And I said, "No, not today, not today. Soon, maybe." And it took me about 6 months before I put it on and then do that. And he says, "Now we can start healing you. We can get you healed." And from that point on, I made great strides. They were slow, but he had never had anybody go 5 years in treatment and not transfer like after 6 months, a year to the group. And it took me 5 years to get into the group. And by the time I got there, were half the guys that were in there were dead. I mean, some died of cancer, some killed. There's one guy, two guys killed himself. A Navy SEAL. Well, no, the other guy, he was a sergeant. Um, no, he was an officer. He had a boat down at the dock at Palm Beach, Florida, and he fell. He fell in the water between the boat and the dock, and it crushed him and killed him. And then the Navy SEAL killed himself because he had one of his men killed in Vietnam on a training mission, and he felt responsible. Um, and the officer that died, and I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. He was a double silver star and a double bronze star recipient, and he was missed by everybody. They both were. They were both great guys, but the stress of the war for Pete Meston was the other guy's name. He was a Navy SEAL, and my wife and I went to his funeral, and it was then that I told her, because I had had close calls with taking my life. But when I went to the funeral and saw his family grieving when we were driving home, I said, "I'll never do that to you, never." And I worked, I worked harder to get much better. And after about 10 years, and that would have been about 2011 or so, I was well on my way to recovery.
Well,
But I still have those dreams, still have the nightmares, still have the flashbacks and that, but I handle them differently now than I did back then when I didn't know what to do.
well, I'm very grateful, Mike, that you have decided to share only a portion of your story with me, because I know we have plenty more interviews coming. But I wanted to end today on a good note. You sent me this photograph, and you told me you had a story to share about this, and I
Ken,
thought it'd be a good way to end us out today.
yeah, that's Ken. Ken was a Vietnamese boy, about 8, 9 years old, um, maybe a little older. And he every day, every time we go out the gate to go on patrol or something, he would stop us and we'd fool around with him because we would get ready outside. We get us outside the gate and we'd be doing different things and getting ready to saddle up and deciding what platoon was going to go first. And so one day we were going out and he would always say to us, he'd say, "Hey Joe," he said, "one day me get older, me go fight VC." And we'd always say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, that helmet, somebody gave him that helmet, a Marine gave him that helmet." And he was always wearing it. And um, this one day we went out and it had to be months later. And then we were going out and it just happened to be us. And he said, "Hey Joe, me come go fight VC with you today." And he said, "Okay." And we're just kidding with him. He goes, "Okay, you can go." And he goes, "Where we go?" And he says, I said, "We're going to the Quaison Valley." And he kind of looked at us, his eyes got real big, and he says, "No, no, me cannot go. My mama son say me gotta go to school." And we laughed so hard. That tells you about the Quaison Valley. You don't need to know anything else. But we weren't going to the Quaison Valley, but he just the thought that we were, and he would go. I don't think he ever used those words. He wants to go with us again.
That's an incredible story. And I love the photograph. I mean, just it's amazing for what you have brought to this so far. And Mike, thank you for your service sincerely, and welcome home, Marine.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Semper Fi.
Semper Fi, sir. And so today, we'll stop on this one, and we'll pick this up again sometime this week. How does that sound?
You tell me when, and I'll be here.
Yes, sir.